some more remembrances from people who have shared our community. Feeling comfortable enough with the church family to wear a Christmas elf costume my mom had made for me for a play during the church service when I was in junior high. Junior high? Elf costume? The trip to Turkey in 1999 with other church friends was most memorable. Mick and Sally organized, and our able guide, Oz, explained the many places we went to. It was so much fun and quite educational too. Making hoagies with Mayor Chuck Hazama to sell at the Olmsted County Fair for a church fundraiser. He was the best marketing tool. And now, our guest preacher today is a child of this church. And he just got a job as minister just a few miles away. Come on up, Danielle.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy anniversary to all of us here. I am Reverend Danielle Bartz. I am a child of this congregation. I think we joined around 1993. I was about 10. I know I was baptized a week after my 11th birthday here in this congregation. I grew up here. I was nurtured here. I was a Sunday school dropout here. I was one of the youth that, if you were here yesterday for the celebration of our dear friend Lavon Young, I was one of the youth that we spoke about. And it was on a mission trip with her and Mark and Greg Davis and Tom McCubbin when I had my mountaintop experience, my first true connection with God, and that led me to ordained ministry. And I bring greetings to you from First Congregational UCC in Winona, Minnesota. That is where I serve as senior pastor. I've only been in this role for 2 weeks, but they were excited for this congregation, my home congregation, as we celebrate together 160 years of ministry and look forward into the future. They are happy I'm here with you, though today not nearly as happy as I am. It is truly an honor and a privilege, and I cannot thank you enough for this invitation. I am humbled and overwhelmed, and I am excited. I am so excited for all that this church has already done, and so excited for what is yet to come. Will you please pray with me? Most loving God, we are here to celebrate. We are here to rejoice. We are here to listen for your word among us, to send us into the future to do your service. And may the words of my heart and the longings of my spirit be pleasing to you. Amen. They started to arrive in the mid-1850s. Described as sturdy, stout-hearted folk, they set up homesteads in the open plains of southern Minnesota. Many were sons and daughters of New England Congregationalists, and they had their first gathering in a log home of a member of the community. And then after building a small log schoolhouse, they gathered there. And just 2 years later, they moved again to the basement of the courthouse, all along worshiping God, sometimes without a minister to guide them. Soon a new community building was built, and space was rented for worship for just $100 a year. Quickly after that move, there was an attempt to amend the creed of this worshiping community to fall in line with the Orthodox Congregational Church. But after much congregational discussion, this did not pass. So the 12 members of the congregation decided to start a new church of their own. On January 3rd, 1858, a church was formed by which, and I quote, "by its very existence stands as a protest against all disloyalty to Christian truth, against all unfaithfulness to the teaching of Christ." And so was formed the Congregational Church of Rochester, our holy inheritance. I feel as though I know those sturdy, stout-hearted folk. As I read the early history of this church and of Rochester itself, I very much felt as though I was reading an anthology of my family. There was something familiar, something easy to understand about them. For those of us who have deeply planted roots in this part of the world, and for those of us who are new to this community, we can recognize something familiar in the early immigrants to southern Minnesota. We can recognize something in them which is still very much alive in our church community. They formed a church to stand opposed to disloyalty to Christian truth. What does that mean? They stood for mercy and grace. They stood for a congregational and democratic way to be in community together. They stood for the teachings of Christ, our radical Savior. We continue to stand for those same things. Yes, of course, we view mercy, justice, and hospitality with 2018 eyes, but the basic truth is still there. This church was formed and continues to live today as a congregation striving to live out a mission which points to and highlights Christian truth. As I prepared for this service of celebration, I tried to imagine what the early preachers of the Congregational Church said to the members. I tried to imagine myself standing in front of a small congregation, one filled with sturdy, stout-hearted folk. What do they need to hear? What message from Scripture will give them comfort and discomfort? Comfort to ease their spirits in hard and uncertain times. Discomfort to embolden their spirits, to compel them towards radical acts of justice and hospitality. And as I began to consider these questions, I started to think of all of you. A community of faithful people who have been for me and so many others an inspiration to serve God. In many ways, what the earliest members of this church needed to hear are the same things that we need to hear today. Comfort and discomfort. Celebration and rejoicing. Courage and renewal. A word of transformation. St. Paul said, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Do not be conformed, but be transformed. Paul's letter to the church in Rome is set apart from the other letters attributed to him that we read in the Bible. Paul was not admonishing the Roman church, which was so very often his habit. No, he was rejoicing in them. He was writing to introduce himself, he himself of Roman heritage, to a strong and vibrant worshiping community. In fact, he was hoping to be encouraged by them and to call on them to help him with his ministry. These words carry a blessing. The people of the church in Rome likely read them as a loving reminder of who they are and who they were striving to become. A reminder of what it means to follow Christ. A celebration of their history and a rejoicing of their future. Do not be conformed, but be transformed. Why was it so important for Paul to remind this early gathering of Jesus' followers of this simple yet profound imperative? Was he fearful for their future? Was he concerned that they would forget the teachings of Christ? Or was he so impressed with who they are that he was simply preaching to the choir? I don't know for sure, but I suspect he wanted to build up that faithful community to compel them to do even more, to compel them to take more risks, to explore the fullness of God's grace, to extend the radical message of Jesus' ministry further than they could imagine. I suspect that Paul so loved that community, he was eager for them to grow even more into themselves. Yes, they were a young, worshiping community, still finding their footing, still exploring ways to live out their faith together, but their future was so bright. So bright, in fact, it lit up Paul's imagination and spirit. This was a love letter, one full of promise for all that they are and would become. Paul goes on, let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. What impact would those words have had on that early church in Rome? What impact would they have had on the first members of this church? What impact do they have for us here today as we look into our future? From its very beginnings, this church has come together to serve God, to stand opposed to injustice and oppression, and to share the message of Jesus, this message that says God's grace and mercy is for all, no exceptions. That is why, as I read the early history of this congregation, it felt familiar. As a child of this church, one that was nurtured into a life of ministry by this congregation, I can see the clear trajectory of this church's path. One from humble beginnings in the basement of a community building to building a new church and persevering when it was destroyed by the tornado which set the stage for what Rochester would become. To becoming a large and vibrant community that one today continues to live out a life of active faith, nurturing those within and those who are simply passing through, sharing grace, spreading love, welcoming all. That is who you are. It is not simply our history we are celebrating, nor just the future. Today, I celebrate who you are in this moment. This is my love letter to you. Do not be conformed to this world which creates separation, division, oppression, racism, sexism, heterosexism, and fear. This world which says church is irrelevant and a faith in God is silly. This world which lives in scarcity, of never enough, and of what is rarely shared. Do not be conformed to this world. Be transformed. Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. Be transformed, you beloved community of God. Conform not to empty promises and false affection, but be transformed to let your love be genuine. Conform not to apathy in the face of injustice, but be transformed to hate what is evil and hold fast to what is good. Conform not to that which says one person is better than another, but be transformed to love one another with mutual affection. Conform not to quiet complaints or whispered disparities, but be transformed to outdo one another in showing honor. Conform not to hesitancy in what must be done, but be transformed to a zeal and ardency of spirit to serve the Lord. Conform not to despair, but be transformed to rejoice in hope with patience and perseverance in prayer. Conform not to scarcity, but be transformed to the abundance of this world to contribute to the needs of those saints working for good. Conform not to closed-mindedness and hardness of heart, but be transformed to radical hospitality for all people of God, especially the stranger. Do not be conformed to this world. Be transformed. Have courage for tomorrow. Rejoice in all that has been accomplished and celebrate all that is to come. We are sturdy, stout-hearted folk striving together to serve God. And as has been proven time and again in our congregation, we can confront any challenge and come through with even stronger faith and more daring to continue. We have a holy inheritance that will lead us into a bright and beautiful future. And through it all, God will continue to bless us. Be transformed. Amen.